So we're delighted now that this panel will be looking at growth and inclusive growth and how we can really drive that growth across the UK to unlock investment to get there. And that's what this panel will be exploring just now. We want to talk about how we unlock some of the barriers to investment. We want to look at how we need to access and how critical the skills workforce is to that growth strategy. We want to talk about international investment and how we can look and explore opportunities for greater international investment, and then the role, obviously, of this sector in ensuring that we can be part of enabling growth across the UK. And we're better to do that from my home city of Birmingham. So welcome to everyone today. What I will do is ask on my panel to briefly introduce themselves, and we will ask them some questions on those key themes. Again, encourage questions that will come through to me on the iPad for the end of the session, and hopefully we'll be able to take some questions from the floor during that time. So I'll start with you, Rupert, before we go on.
Thank you very much for inviting us here today. My name's Rupert Pleasant. I'm the CEO of Guernsey Finance. For those of you who don't know us, we're a joint initiative between the states of Guernsey, which is our government in Guernsey, and the Guernsey financial services industry, and we connect and promote Guernsey as a leading international finance centre into certain strategic target markets. As you probably guessed, the UK remains our biggest strategic market. We're very proud to be part of the British Isles. We're very proud to be part of the British family, and we'll come on to a little later exactly what we contribute, but it's great to be here today.
Thank you. Carl.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's indeed afternoon. Carl Size, I'm the Chief Markets Officer for PwC. So I look after all of our clients and markets agenda across the UK. By background, I'm very much a financial services practitioner, audit partner for many, many years of a number of institutions, and actually very much have a home here in the Midlands, having been to Birmingham University and led our West Midlands financial services practice as well.
Thank you. Claire.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's good to be here. I'm Claire Tunley. I'm the Chief Exec of the Financial Services Skills Commission. And similar to City UK, we're a membership body for financial services firms with the UK workforce. And we work to help close skills gaps and help firms close their skills gaps. So we have over 40 members employing over 300,000 people across the UK. And if we're talking about Birmingham connections, my whole family's from the West Midlands, the Black Country. So it's nice to be back.
Thank you. Last but not least.
Sandra, thanks for having me. My name's Cuan Coulter. I'm the head of the businesses that State Street has in the UK and in Ireland. For those of you that don't know what State Street is, it's one of the very large safekeeping banks on a global basis. About 11% of all the investable assets on the planet are safe kept by State Street. And then independently, we're an asset manager as well. We're the fourth largest asset manager in the world, about $4.5 trillion of US dollars under management. Sort of go through our business. I think in the context of the City UK, I also chair the US-UK Market Advisory Group, perhaps not so surprisingly, given that State Street is headquartered out of Boston, Massachusetts. And I have zero credentials in the sort of in the Brummie Skidakes.
We'll get there. We'll work on it. So a question for all the panel. I'll start with you, if that's okay, Carl. What would you identify as the most important factor in ensuring the investment that in the UK is spread across the country? And if you can touch on the role of maybe national, regional, and local government.
Yeah, so actually the role I had before the current one, I looked after all of our regional practices across the UK, and one of the great things I got to do was actually go and speak to lots of different people all around the business. Actually, with John Godfrey, we were going out to various different places and actually seeing what the country does and the innovation that is there is quite phenomenal. But I think what it centres around is being really clear on what are the sectors, what are the areas of focus that each individual bit of the UK country really gets behind. And one of the things I often found was everywhere you went, everyone wanted to be green something, or they wanted to be med something, or tech something. You have to pick something. And I do think being really clear what it is each region, each nation wants to be known for gives that clarity of strategy, and it enables financial services, it enables other ecosystems to know what it is they're bringing in and that local business environment really needs. So I think that clarity of message around what it is a region or a nation or a geography is known for is critical.
Yeah, because the danger is if you try and do too much, then you lose the momentum and people coalesce around various different things.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Cuan, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, so I guess I have lots of thoughts. I think it's a nuanced balance to get right, because I think the idea is that we should be growing the size of the pizza, not making sure that we're each getting our fair share of a smaller and smaller pizza. So I think that there's perhaps, and I would say this perhaps because it's self-serving, but I think there's a role for local and regional government to have that idiosyncratic brand. I also think it's really important, especially if you're thinking about kind of international investment, to have a cohesiveness between what's happening at the national level, the regional level, and at the local level. And we're probably going to get into this in some of the panel, but I think the dissonance that gets created between those layers of government, or the bureaucracy that gets created between layers of government, actually acts as an inhibitor to capital deployment. So actually, I agree with the point that Carl's making. I think there does need to be sort of a brand and a sort of a specific thing, but I think that has to be sort of part of a more cohesive whole.
Yeah. Rupert, can I bring you in?
Sure. I guess it's what's our role in all this, because we're not part of the United Kingdom, we're part of the British Isles. So what is our role in this? And it's basically as a conduit to capital for the UK. We obviously knew that there was an election taking place earlier in the year, so we did a study with Frontier Economics, and I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Frontier Economics, a very well-known research house. And what we really wanted to establish is what was Guernsey's contribution, especially from a financial services point of view, to the United Kingdom economy. And it stands at 57 billion. So there's 57 billion of capital that's conduit through Guernsey into the UK. I'd just like to say at this stage as well, it's not just into the southeast of England. It goes into all 4 nations. We're going to do a further study. So again, it does go into all 4 nations, and a lot is coming to the likes of Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, Edinburgh, Cardiff, etc., etc. So we're very proud to actually put that in. But what if we weren't there? And again, we've just had a very interesting conversation with the Minister. And one of the questions that I asked was, how do we maintain that relationship? Because obviously we don't want that relationship to sour. We don't want that relationship to in any way be degraded. And obviously I'm now talking as part of the Crown dependencies as well. I'm talking as part of Jersey, Guernsey and the Isle of Man as well, which is probably running into the hundreds of billions. If that 57 billion didn't come through Guernsey, it probably wouldn't come here at all. You look at the likes of Luxembourg, you look at the likes of Dubai, you look at the likes of Singapore. I've just come back from Singapore. They're hungry. Dubai is very hungry at the moment, and they're after London's supper. They're after our supper as well. So again, we need that relationship to be strong. It has to come through part of the British family. So again, this is what we contribute, and we can help. That we've got to be part of that private-public partnership of deploying capital into the whole of the UK.
So you would say that it's quite important that national, regional, local government are plugging into those sources of
100%.
investment. They're not just looking inwardly, they're looking out at places like Guernsey and so on, and what's being driven into the economies here.
Exactly right. I mean, we've just appointed our first North of England representative, who's just over here. And I know we're in the Midlands, so...
we'll let you off.
Absolutely. Please don't shoot for that one. But again, it's really important for us to engage. We went to the Labour Party conference a little earlier this year, and we engaged with some of the Metro mayors. We engaged with some of the MPs and really told them that, you know, this is a good news message. This is something we can get over. So 100% at all levels. Obviously, our message is really at the top level for government. And I hate to use the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
So as such, keep that relationship solid.
Excellent. And Claire?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I come at this from a people lens, a skills lens, and what's great, as we heard from the Minister earlier, that skills and talent is seen as one of the pillars of growth for the sector, which is absolutely crucial. People are everywhere. 2/3 of the sector are financial services and professional services are outside of London. So the agenda is really relevant. And I think what's got to work is the clarity of a vision at a national level
that can then follow through a regional, devolved nation and local level. And I think skills is a really good lens to sort of look at that hierarchy and how that works. And it's slightly different with skills because skills sits within DFE, it doesn't sit within Treasury. So we've got to have that dialogue at government. Government's got to be joined up as well. But you can't drive a skills policy and a skills plan and deliver that only at a national level. The delivery has to be at the regional and more local level or devolved nation level. So having clarity of what the vision is around growth and the sector and how skills are essential to that drive of productivity. I mean, I hear firms say we cannot deliver our tech transformation because we don't have the skills. So it's crucial that we get the skills and talent angle right. We've got to have that clarity and then enable the devolved mayoral combined authorities, or whether it's the devolved nations, actually then follow through and deliver it. And my background is skills policy and in local and central government, and done a lot of work with the regions as well. And there needs to be an element of hands-off meddling at the national level to allow that delivery, because labour markets are regional, they're not national in picture. So that, for me, they've got to all work together to that common vision.
So national facilitates, regional delivers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, excellent. We were just talking to the Minister, and you heard her talking today about the Mansion House speech, and they setting out their vision for growth. They've talked about the importance of unlocking gap capital to grow at that speech, and suggested how that might be achieved. How do you see this agenda unfolding, Cuan?
Yeah, so I mean, I probably should start by saying I think it's sort of fantastic and very, very supportive that we have a government that's talking so thoroughly about growth and sort of being expansionary as opposed to derivative. And I think a key sort of component of the success of that will be sort of how coherent the industrial strategy is. And we've already sort of mentioned the fact that you've got this kind of national industrial strategy, and then it needs to be, it needs to be sort of disaggregated into regions and localities. There's lots in the industrial strategy that I think we have to, that we sort of have to look forward to. I think the sort of capital markets, ongoing capital markets reform, I think is really important. I think the asset management business and the crown jewel that has been for the UK is a really a key piece of that. And then obviously wholesale financial services, I think, is an area of like particular interest to us. I think as it relates to sort of, how it rises the tide for all boats in the country, I'm particularly interested in, how we aggregate pools of capital, how we get pools of capital to work in a much more scaled and much more efficient and effective way. And then likewise, less interested from a commercial point of view, but sort of as a citizen, how that then gets deployed, and are we making efficient deployment decisions? I'm sure we'll get into that as well. But I think sort of one without the other is only half the equation. Arguably, we don't really have a sort of capital accretion problem. We might have a national capital accretion problem, but on a global basis, there's lots of capital to be deployed. So the question, I think, for regions and localities is how can we present compelling, efficient, investment cases so that capital will be deployed in the localities that we have a sort of a particular interest in.
I mean, Rupert, you were feeling that there was opportunity to see that. There were people queuing up maybe to see some of that capital.
Yeah, certainly the Labour Party conference. I mean, I'll come on to that in a second. But I think when we look back at the manifesto of the Labour Party government, and three things struck me. So it was kickstart economic growth, create strategic partnership with business, and become a clean energy superpower. And obviously Mansion House touched on all of these as well. But one of the key factors is really it's got to be driven by a partnership with private capital. And obviously one of the things that's absolutely key for the UK is foreign direct investment. And this is something I think we did touch on earlier, and it's something we discussed at dinner last night as well. Foreign direct investment into the UK has been declining year on year. I think it's since 2016. That's according to the House of Commons Library. So it's how to reverse that. How do we then get that kick-started again? We're bucking the trend, and I'm, from an international perspective, Guernsey's FDI into the UK has actually increased 14% year on year since 2020. So out of that 57 billion that's actually deployed here, what does FDI actually do, if you want to put it that way? So for every million of FDI that's actually deployed in the UK, it generates £98,000 of gross value added for the UK economy, so absolutely huge. But it also creates 2.9 jobs for the economy as well. Why it's not 3, I don't know, but it's 2.9. So, it's a massive, massive net contributor. And just out of that 57 billion that we invest, and as I say, that's irrespective of other Crown dependencies as well, it generates 7 billion of investor returns here in the United Kingdom. I'm sure the Exchequer is rubbing its hands together at that. It actually then creates 2 billion of returns for investment managers here in commissions, etc. So again, massive, massive tangible amounts. So if I was looking back at the Mansion speech, I would basically say it's got to be FDI. That's got to be a huge, huge focus. And that will then trickle down into the regions, and it will grow the prosperity there into things like infrastructure, school, education, etc.
Yeah. If Cohen's right, Carl, and there is investment there ready to be deployed, and the pipeline of viable projects is not there for investment, how can local leaders make sure that any barriers are unlocked so that we can get to those resources?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because actually when you go out across the country, we're certainly hearing the funding, so exactly the points we made, is there.
Yeah.
There is funding there. The challenge, and certainly when I was speaking to the infrastructure bank, where are the viable projects for us to really get after? And there's almost a pent-up frustration in that it's like, I've got money to deploy, but I need help getting there. And I think there's two main things that are really needed. You need to start by getting the confidence really up. Confidence that this is a viable project. And what do I mean by that? Well, one, I think you need stability of policy. That confidence that this, if this is a big infrastructure investment or something else, quite frankly, but you've got policy that's going to keep on flowing in behind that. It needs to line up with, I think, the local strategy. Back to my earlier point about places being known for things. If you've got a consistency with what the local region or the local area has built up behind, you've got policy alignment, local skills and capabilities, but also this desire to really do something different in that place. And then I think alongside that, you need really strong local leadership. And the local leadership needs to come from people that are willing to stand up, bring people together and make the difference. Because these issues that we have across our country all need many different people coming to them. Solving the clean energy aspect is one micro component over here, but you need 4 or 5 different businesses and different bits of organisation coming together to be able to facilitate that happening. What it then needs is a leader to stand up and go, I'm going to be at the forefront of this. I'll work out what the vehicle needs to look like. I'll work out what tax incentives might be needed, or what breaks we can get, or what guarantees might be needed out of local governments. So trying to leverage all of those things together to help to create the solution. But it does need someone to stand up above. We're doing something actually in South Wales, very much trying to bring lots of groups together to try and solve the problem. But without a group that is seen to be bringing that together and helping facilitate the solution, it wouldn't happen. And that's why it needs that local leadership to really make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing that. And sorry, Rupert, did you want to come back?
Yeah, I just, again, found it quite interesting. I'd take a little bit of a contrarian view in that we spoke to a lot of Metro mayors, and we spoke to a number of the new Labour MPs, and obviously they'd only been in place for such a brief time at that Labour Party conference, who were struggling. They had projects. They actually had projects available. I'll give you an example. We spoke to Lorraine Beavers, who's basically the MP for Blackpool North and Fleetwood, and they're looking at a project at the moment to actually put a hydroelectric barrage over the River Wyre in Lancashire. Not only does it then obviously create jobs, it generates electricity, it creates 2 communities that haven't really been connected for a long time. And she basically came to us and said, how do I get funding for this? So I think there is a bit of a disconnect at the moment somewhere between these projects, which have been available for years apparently, and it's something that we're looking at through the Guernsey Green Fund, ourselves at the moment, and hopefully we can deploy some capital there. But I think it's about dialogue, it's about engagement. A lot of these new MPs are finding their feet at the moment. They're finding their feet with their constituents, they're finding their feet within the party itself. And we just found going and chatting to them on a one-to-one basis was absolutely fascinating. And suddenly you tease these projects out, and there they are.
So the private sector needs to be talking
100%.
to the authorities so that we can make that connection, because they're the ones that will make the connections at a local level. Carl,
Very quick, we'll come back on you. So look, the projects are definitely there. The challenge is the viability of them and the confidence in them. That is the problem.
Yeah.
So there's the brilliant ideas. Yeah. Amazing things, and you look at it and go, the skills, the jobs, why would you not? The problem is it's getting that confidence and the viability so that the funding providers go, yes, I'm there.
And the environment's right. We talked about risk today. We talked about freeing up people to make mistakes and create the right environment, and that's not a risk-averse environment, and that's the key theme. Claire, I'm going to change themes slightly and bring you in, because you talked about skills and that being sort of key to your world. Businesses need access to skilled workforce to grow, and how can we ensure that businesses across the UK's regions and nations have strong local pools of talent from which to grow their workforce?
It's actually a similar challenge to what you just outlined in terms of investment, that joining the dots is that collaboration, and there's a need, as I mentioned before, for that sort of regional element or a devolved nation element to really drive that through and actually be able to respond when there is the opportunity, like the example you was given, to actually say, wherever it might be, for that body to say, okay, we've got some freedom and some structure, some infrastructure where we can go and invest in some skills and upskill, so we're ready to respond to whatever that might mean. And that's not been there recently, so hoping that some of that devolution will help that arrive. I think there is a need for collaboration though, and that's not to say it's because it's not all government's job to do this, it is business's job as well. We need to have a skilled workforce for the future to employ, so we need to be thinking about what that looks like and explaining that and sharing that with whether it's national, regional, local government, training providers, universities, etc., so that can be built in. It's not fair for us to go, well, you haven't got the right people to employ, but I'm not going to tell you what I need. We need to be much having that dialogue on a much earlier basis, and the opportunity is there, and the potential benefits are great. I do think that the point you made though, Carl, about areas being known for particular expertise is a tricky one, because whenever you go and look at a skills plan, I guarantee if you look at them, either whether they're local ones or regional ones, they'll all have digital and tech as an absolute priority. And my question is, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think, again, it's that dialogue of employers engaged with regional leadership to say, this is where we're investing in your area, and this is why, and this is some of the expertise that we need, and it's particularly whether it's fintech or green finance or insurtech, whatever it might be, because then that allows that coalescence around some sort of vision, and I don't think that's there yet because it's so headline, it's financial services or it's tech, it doesn't go deeper. So I think there's a bit of maturing to be done, which will take some time, and we've got to be part of that conversation. But there's an awful lot happening at the moment, changes around apprenticeships, etc., coming in that businesses can really get involved. And I would point to some examples elsewhere around the country. So, for example, Yorkshire and the Humber have a Financial and Professional Services Skills Commission. They've got employers coming together to say, okay, this is the problem in our area, these are the skills and talent we need, we can't get, let's collaborate. Similar things happening in Belfast in Northern Ireland. So there is the opportunity, and we've been having conversations. I was up here in July talking to firms about skills challenges in the West Midlands region, to say, actually, what do we need to do together to define the problem and what the solutions are. And it's very clear that this is not about graduates and apprentices, early career, it's about all levels of reskilling, all ages in the workforce and at different levels. So there's a lot to do, but the point is collaboration. We've just got to get at the table and be ready to input.
I mean, I could double down on that. I mean, we've been in London since 1972, but about 25 years ago we went to Edinburgh, and we were sort of passengers, right? So we had the benefit of an existing financial services ecosystem, an educational sort of infrastructure that so we had an ecosystem that we could just kind of plug into. Much more recently, we're looking at Cardiff with a much smaller footprint, but the complexity of sort of establishing Cardiff compared to the complexity or the relative lack of complexity with establishing Edinburgh, it sort of serves this illustration of how much more variables there are when you're sort of in a place that's where there's more nascent things. So like even basic things like is there sufficient real estate? And the real estate I thought would be like okay, let's just walk in and get a lease. It's not even as simple as that. And then with talent development, the life cycle on talent development is 10 times longer than it is on property development. So it's a non-trivial set of variables that you're having to coordinate. It sort of just reinforces the need for like public-private partnership in this context.
Yeah, the partnerships point is absolutely spot on, but also the point you make around the precision of the skill you're really talking about. If I think about, take one of your examples of Belfast, we've partnered up very strongly with Queen's University there, and over the course of about the last 10 years or so, we've had 4,000 or 5,000 graduates go through there that we've then sought to employ, and then actually they've gone out into the local workforce. But we've been quite precise about what skills and capabilities we want, a lot very much in the technology field, but actually at a micro level beyond that. So you might go, well, specifically I need cyber capability in this particular area, but you need to get quite precise because otherwise it just becomes a generic thing and doesn't really deliver to what the market needs.
But you can convalesce, to put your point, Carl, and how easy it is to what you're known for. If you look at the Midlands, it's known for its universities. And if you convalesce around the universities and you try and take strength from those, and I'm not just talking about they convalesce and they work very strongly with the FE sector, they have very strong apprentices schemes and developments as well. So I'm not just talking about having to go to university, but all the things that come around that. Then for the Midlands, that's a talent pool, and it's also will have very divergent themes that are coming out through those universities, but you can convalesce around the strength of the universities. So it is possible, I think, to find something that can deal with the variances if a place takes advantage of what it's really strong in. I think that's possible.
And I think it speaks to I think you've made the point about leadership and bravery, and I know it's an example that PwC did in Bradford.
Yeah.
And there was a decision to open an office in Bradford, which I don't know because I wasn't there, but I think the motivations were around looking at different talent pool, potentially boosting socioeconomic diversity. But having spoken to Kevin Ellis about this, he said it was surprising because actually they found a talent pool that wasn't tapped into. It completely fed into the fact that financial services offers, it was consulting, wasn't it? But it offers good quality jobs, which, the word of mouth that goes from the employees, and it comes back to Carol's point, that leads to greater trust and engagement with the industry, people being interested in the sector. And it's had a much wider knock-on from that leadership point. And then you get other firms coalescing around that as well. So I think that leadership point is really key. But that was led by a firm. That wasn't led by a local government or a regional government. That was a business, and exactly what you're doing in Cardiff. But what we need to do as a sector is be ready to engage with government at all levels when those opportunities are around, and then support government when they're enabling regional local governments to respond to when we come knocking on the door with a big idea.
What I would just say, just building very briefly on that point, because I wouldn't want PwC to take all the credit there, because actually what was brilliant was the local government actually coming in really behind it and really supporting the activity that was there. So we've actually just opened up a new office there right in the centre, which is going to have, hopefully over the course of the next 5 years, 500 people. And they are from a very different socioeconomic background, and it's great to see some brilliant talent. But actually it was that collaboration point we've talked about. It was the local government coming together and reinforcing that was what they really wanted to happen. It was making sure then the building was the right building in the right place with the right brand and signage to say, this is a place to be, this is a place that is actually going somewhere. That's what makes a difference. Well,
that's a message, isn't it, that the sector is critical and sometimes government follows. So sometimes, convalescing, this financial services sector, the work the City UK are doing, if we can convalesce around an idea and putting something forward, the investment strategy that we're looking at, that often the government will come in behind, and maybe that's a lesson to us all. Rupert, I want to bring you in last to just, because you touched on, it's not just London that you're investing in, you're investing across the country. How can we ensure that hubs like Birmingham and other places, of course, benefit from the investment? In that question, just how important is connectivity between the hubs across the country important for growth?
Again, I think I'll bring in the international aspect. I think using Guernsey as a hub to actually invest into the UK, I think is quite fundamental. So our target markets, as well as the UK, North America, so we promote the UK in the likes of New York and Miami. Middle East is going to be Dubai, Saudi, Qatar, etc. Singapore, Hong Kong, but also Southern Africa as well. So this is where the capital's coming from. Why is it coming to the UK? It's coming here because of safety and stability. It's coming because people recognise that there is the rule of law here. There is a good regulator here, absolutely. I think there's obviously still some work to be done there, but it is seen as a safe pair of hands. The risk they have at home, so the reason that they're investing here is for that safety, it is for that security. So I think if the regions can actually demonstrate that, they will be attracting that kind of business. And it's across the board. It can be anything. It can be infrastructure, it can be schools, housing, social, green and sustainability, etc. So I think we can be the catalyst, but it's having the safety and security in those regions, absolutely. And just quickly coming on to coming back to the educational side, which I'm quite amazed. Just spent 2 weeks out in Singapore, Hong Kong and Kuala Lumpur as well. The high regard that they have for our university education system is absolutely fundamental. Our institutions are seen as paramount. They will spend a lot of money in sending sons, daughters, nephews, nieces here. And it could be the Birmingham area, the Manchester area, the London area, etc. It is throughout the United Kingdom. I don't think we should lose sight of that we have a massive asset in education, definitely.
Absolutely. Cuan, I just want to bring you in slightly on tangent just on connectivity. So you made an interesting point to me earlier about the way we work and how important it is that we really do look at the way we work and how important it is to be present, visible, meeting and seeing people still.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my interpretation of connectivity was much more like physical logistics
but
kind
I
of
wanted
thing.
to bring it in.
And so I guess I'll speak out of both sides of my mouth. On the one hand, I think over the last half a dozen years, we've learned a lot about connectivity and what that means. And I think we've, in many ways, sort of unencumbered ourselves from like physical logistics. So people have learned the ways of remote working, and I think there's sort of lots of social utility in all of that. But if you think about what sort of the needs are in the country, and frankly, even if you think about in the most modern sense of working, when you're talking about gigafactories or offshore wind or whatever the big infrastructure projects are, even if it's highways, like there's a physicality to the things that we need to make these investments in. And I think we also have to be cognizant of the fact that, to the point that like a lot of this investment won't be insular, it won't be incestuous, it'll be inbound. So I think this idea of connectivity, while we've got a more expanded view of it, there are still physical, absolute logistical constraints, and we need to be cognizant of that. Like, you still need to be able to get from London to Birmingham easily, and vice versa. Investors still need to be able to visit the site. And so I think the way I interpreted your question was that, like, you can't underestimate the need for connectedness within the nations of the United Kingdom.
Yeah, absolutely. And the confidence people, to invest, they have to be confident that the infrastructures that people investing in is going to be there and follow through. So I'm going to bring in some questions now from the audience. One here is, do you think that regions and local areas have the expertise to articulate investable propositions? What role can the sector play in supporting this? So, I mean, one of the things I would say is I'm operating out of Birmingham. A lot of people say to me, because I'm a managing director, I've worked internationally, they always assume I work out of London. Is the expertise here? We've heard from Goldman Sachs earlier today and how they have invested here, and it wasn't just a sort of an overflow, it was to find the talent, to have the talent here. So I think there is investable, there are people here in the regions and in other places to articulate what the propositions are. But what more could we be doing, Claire, on that? How can we make sure that we can articulate that message that it's people are the talent is everywhere and
I think it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because you need expertise, like you say, in government, public sector as well to respond to some of that. And unfortunately, the pay differentials mean that talent quite often migrates to the place where the remuneration is higher. That's just something that's naturally the case. So I think there does need to be, I'm repeating myself, but there does need to be some of that partnership. What I think is also useful is that storytelling, and I think we heard that earlier, is where there has been successes, the Bradford example is really good, the Northern Ireland example, is explaining that. And what you hear from firms, this isn't, we went there because it was a nice thing to do, it's actually become a really strong talent proposition that we can deliver that for local people, there's benefit there, etc. I don't think it gets over the problem of have we got the right expertise, which I think the question is getting at, have we got the right expertise in government at all levels to respond to that? I think that's a challenge, absolutely. But is there, by having more of the dialogue and actually trying to build those expertise, can the public sector benefit from that as well? If we're saying about let's have green investment in building a dam across a river, or there needs to be the equivalent upskilling in the public sector. But I'm not in charge of civil service skills.
But if you have a partnership, we can help. If we're based here, if we have a very strong West Midlands financial services sector, PwC, huge office here. If we are collaborating with those local regional authorities, then we can support in that journey.
Just quickly, there is an element of storytelling though, because I know when I sort of speak to either City of London Police or FCA and things like that, they can attract talent because it's purpose driven. So City of London Police, lead on fraud, and they say actually we don't have problems attracting people because they want to work on that thing with the public good. So that I think maybe some of these public sector roles need to learn from that messaging.
I think that in every bit of the country there are facilitating organisations, right? And I think that's the key piece. Is everywhere you can find somebody that can do it, whether it's an L&G or whether it's a Lloyds, a Barclays, whoever. There are a DLA. There are many organisations that can do that have got people to be able to do that. And I think that's the key. Is we've got lots of innovation. We've got people with amazing brains that come up with the ideas. We've got to do the connectivity between the financing providers, the facilitators, to then come up with it. So do I think the amazing brains that come out of the universities have got the way to create the viable propositions on their own? No, probably not. But if we partner them up with the people that do, then they can.
Fantastic. Thank you. I've got some other questions here, but I'm just conscious, is there any questions in the room before I carry on with the questions on the iPad? Okay, so I've got, we can't get by without referring to President Trump. So with potential tariffs imposed by President Trump next year, do you think the UK will see an uptick in international investment on the back of this? Don't know who to address this question to. Anybody? Any takers?
Come on.
You spent time with 20 years in the US.
My public health warning statement is, I think it's still too early to make predictions about what a Trump administration would do. So there's a huge caveat to sort of like the predictability of what those outcomes might end up looking like. But I think in short, so the UK as an island nation or a series of island nations is much more dependent on, and therefore should be much more pro international trade, openness of borders and markets. And therefore, if there is a world where you have greater polarization and potentially the US that sort of becomes very insular, I think there's several areas where like the UK can present potentially a third way. So sustainability might be an example where you have a very sort of rules-based, pretty dogmatic, perspective coming out of the EU, and then potentially a sort of climate denial sort of construct in the US. And by the way, I'm just simplifying. But in the UK, you could represent something in between those two options that actually is appealing to a large investor base on a global stage. I think you said AI is another example. Actually, I think AI is one of those ones where we already are leading, where we've got regulatory constructs that seem like rational. There's lots of experimentation taking place in a sort of risk-controlled way. I think we might end up in a place where there's another third way in AI. I think tokenization of traditional assets or digitization generally is another area. So I think there's several sort of thematic areas where like the UK could sort of put out their wares in a way that's different and actually would be accretive to the economy as a whole.
I can't believe we got to the end without mentioning AI.
And just one more question that we had. Why do you think, I think it was Rupert, you mentioned the FDI into the UK is decreasing. Is there a role for the regions in addressing this decline?
I think one of the big topics of conversation has obviously been risk and engaging with the regulator, that maybe the bar is too high and it's not business friendly. That could be one of the reasons that it's been seen externally that, as I said before, the UK has been seen as a very safe pair of hands, and that's their use. Whereas now, exactly, we've been talking about AI, we've been talking about crypto, we've been talking about blockchain, we've been talking about some quite exciting concepts out there and asset classes out there. So maybe having a regulator that embraces this a little bit more, that could be a catalyst to getting more capital flows into the UK. But also, you look at the likes of Singapore, Dubai, Luxembourg, etc. Brexit didn't help, without doubt. I don't think that really helped from that point of view, because a lot of capital's been redirected to Luxembourg. So again, you can see by Starmer going and making certain representations to the EU to get closer into the club again. I think that could have its uses as well. So yeah, I think it's going to be a slow process, but I can see it generating.
I don't want to be too provocative or defend the regulatory construct too much, but I wonder whether there's actually something more fundamental. Like I don't think this kind of risk aversion is just a regulatory construct. I think there's a deeper cultural question that we have to ask about, is it the trauma of the global financial crisis? Is it something else? But, I spent 20 years in the US before coming to the UK. I've been in the UK for 7 years. And sort of as a cultural context, we don't reward risk-taking in the way that the US culture does. There's much more shame associated with failure. There's much less. I think the term is the tall poppy. There's a little bit of a tall poppy thing. So I think there's bigger questions to be asked as a culture. I do think there's lots of work for the regulators to do, but I think it's too one-dimensional to sort of say it's a regulatory issue.
So you would say the bigger question is making sure that we have the confidence and then we create the right environments.
Yeah.
It's very good. All the points we've been making today, I think there's clear evidence that there's a lot we can do regionally, nationally, to invest for growth. And I think you've all made clear we all got a part to play in that. So I would like to thank you all, Cuan, Claire, Carl and Rupert. Excellent discussion, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.